people sometimes call the concern the Manchurian chip problem, that something gets into the telecommunications system that can be activated down the road. This is a very serious threat. So let Huawei do whatever legal maneuvers they want to do. I'm confident of the outcome of that.
And that's National Security Advisor John Bolton speaking with Maria Bartiromo after Chinese telecom giant Huawei challenged the U.S. in court, suing the government for banning its agency from using the company's products. The Trump administration says Huawei's technology could be used for spying. And Mr. Bolton says this goes beyond just one Chinese company.
We're in intense discussions, absolutely unrelated to trade issues, with friends and allies and partners all over the world on how to deal with this. Nobody should minimize how serious this is. It's not just China we're worried about, let's be clear. We're worried about compromising the security of sensitive American communications really on a global basis.
Joining me now is retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, senior fellow and military expert with defense priorities. Colonel Davis, thank you for joining us. And I want to start by asking you, what do you think of National Security Advisor John Bolton's assertion about the Manchurian chip?
Yeah, you know, when it comes to national security, obviously there should be nothing left unchecked and off the board, whether it's physical security or cyber security. We have a strong obligation at the government level to make sure our country is safe. But in situations like this, I think we need to be really careful to go too far, especially when we're dealing with situations that are very sensitive on the economic and political issue. And we need to let that work its way through the diplomatic channels. And so far, it looks like we're doing that. I think we need to be careful, though, not to go too far on this. And I think really to Bolton's concerns there, you know, there is a German idea in their country where they have the concerns about this to say, hey, we will only, you know, use Huawei equipment if it has been vetted through companies that we can validate or are compliant with our systems. And you know, and maybe that's something that we can do too, because I think we want to be, you know, economically fair, because we want them to be economically fair with our products in their country.
Right. You're talking about Germany's requirement that suppliers of 5G networks adhere to a list of security requirements. That's what you're speaking of, and you think that the U.S. should go along with that as well. Let me ask you about Huawei's CFO, Meng Wanzhou. She's likely to be extradited to the U.S. to face financial fraud charges. Is there any potential landmines for the U.S. in that process?
Well, I do think this is really sensitive, and we have to be very careful about how we go here, because we don't want our you know, senior economic officials or government officials, company officials, when we're doing business overseas, and especially in China, because it's such a large market. We don't want to set a standard that we want them to basically do a tit-for-tat kind of thing, as often happens in the international arena. So I think we need to tread very carefully here. We want to keep our country safe, and if she has done anything that has to do with fraud, then that should be certainly taken care of and dealt with appropriately. But we need to tread very carefully here, because we don't want any negative consequences on our own individuals.
How will all of this affect President Trump's and Chinese President Xi's trade negotiations?
Well, you know, that is such a complex and multifaceted issue, because you have all the economic issues that are involved across the board on all the things, as well as the Huawei situation. You also have some compelling, you know, connections with the North Korea nuclear issue. I mean, all these things kind of are intertwined. And I think that's one of the pieces, but it's just something that we're going to have to completely handle across the board in a very, very sensitive measure, always looking out for our interests.
And why should the average American care about this Huawei case?
Well, if there was anything discovered that was in fact a Manchurian chip, as Bolton talked about, well, that would obviously be very you know, concerning to our country, because nobody wants to do anything that's going to be compromising our security and you know, and allowing anyone to spy on us. But at the same time, if that's not the case, if we can validate it and certify that that's not the case, then you know, let's also benefit from the you know, the advances in technology, and you know, and even compete on an even plane with our own stuff. So we want to take advantage of the opportunities, and we don't want to go too far protectionism that it actually costs us.
And I want to go back to, you know, you're very clear, Colonel Davis, to say, listen, we have to protect our technology to make sure there's nothing planted in there that could eventually spy on any of our citizens or our government now or later. But you say that we have to be very careful. What could happen if the U.S. doesn't handle this properly?
Well, if we go too far on one end and just say, I'm sure it'll be okay, we won't need to put these things in, we'll just trust them that everything's fine, and then it turns out that there is some kind of technology in there that would allow them to spy on us, well, that would obviously be very bad. But if we go too far the other direction and say, well, just because there might be something, we're going to shut this off, and then we deprive our country of some potentially very advanced technology that could help our business and our own country, here in the United States. So that's why it's a really delicate balancing action. That's why the diplomatic arena is the right place to handle this.
And also our government, the Trump administration, is making sure that the Chinese and other bad actors in that lane don't steal our intelligence,
right,
in terms of our business intelligence, the models to create different technology.
Absolutely. We have the and I do agree with Bolton on this. We have an obligation to keep our country safe no matter where the source is of anyone who tries to do anything to negative to our country. And certainly there are plenty of actors out there, whether it's state or unstate actors, that would like to use cybersecurity against us. So we have to be really, really vigilant on that. And they're right on that.
All right, Colonel Davies, we'll leave it there. And I thank you, sir.
Always my pleasure. Thanks, Arthel.
Likewise.